Welcome back to Established Dominance Fantasy Football. This episode is going to be a little different tonight. We'll start off with injuries, then we'll talk waiver wire ads with a twist. Last, we'll preview tomorrow night's Thursday Night Football matchup, and there's a lot going on in this week's episode, so buckle up. Now let's catch up on significant injuries from the weekend and where we stand as of Wednesday evening. Let's start by covering the trades. Basically, there were a lot of defensive players traded, which made the Lions, Steelers, and Ravens stronger, and the Browns and Saints weaker. So keep that in mind when you're streaming defenses. Now, for skill players, CMC, the coaches are playing their games again. He'll probably play, but don't drop Mason, who practiced in full. The Bucks are a train wreck at wide receiver. Evans didn't practice. He's not coming back until after the bye. Irving, he's limited with a toe injury. McMillan didn't practice. He's got a hamstring. He's not looking good. Shepard, he didn't practice, but if you saw his circuit catches and how many times he landed hard on his hip, that's not a shocker. Palmer, he's the only healthy Tampa Bay wide receiver. So this smells like Shepard overexerted himself, and Palmer and Otten will be the only ones catching balls. Prescott, he's got a significant hammy injury. He's multi-week. He's droppable most likely here. Brian Robinson, he was limited with a hamstring, but he had the same problem last week, and then he pulled him at game time, so monitor him closely. Goddard, he practiced in full. He's back. But Devonta Smith, he didn't practice. Ruh-roh. A.J. Brown, he was limited, but he did practice, so that's a good sign. For Jacksonville, another train wreck. Brian Thomas was limited. Etienne limited. Bigsby limited. They all had bad weeks last week. Let's hope they can snap out of it against Minnesota. Probably not. That's a tough defense. Moss, he has a neck injury. He's all but done. You can drop him. Mahomes, he's fine, and he's getting all the friendly ref calls. You can start him with confidence. Isaiah Likely is out. That's a big deal for Andrews. Olave didn't practice. Patterson and Fields are both healthy for Pittsburgh. Higgins is doubtful for tomorrow night's game. That's a big deal. Jonathan Brooks. Now, he got activated. Don't expect much from him, and he's not probably going to start, and you shouldn't start him. He's going to slow roll into a full-time gig, but since Carolina is all but eliminated, I expect Carolina to play him as much as possible in weeks 12 through 17, which is just in time for the fantasy playoffs. He could be the difference maker you need, or just another rookie who came back from a knee injury too soon. We'll see. Hubbard is still playing well. He's not going anywhere, but there's nothing more on the waiver wire this week, so what do you have to lose? Pierce and Collins, they both did not practice. I don't expect either of them to play. Coleman, he has a multi-week wrist injury, but they haven't called him out yet. I would get a bench player ready. CeeDee Lamb, he's limited, but he's hurting. Khalil Herbert, he could play for Cincy tomorrow, but I bet he would only get a handful of touches. Mike Williams, he got traded to Pittsburgh, but he's not worthy of playing or starting. Corley moves up, but he's really not that relevant either for the Jets, so I wouldn't start either of those guys. The rest of the NFL was limited. Tomorrow will be a better look at all the injuries. Now let's move on to the waiver wire. This is the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about. This week's picks will have a playoff flavor to them because it's week 10 and you're either in contention for a playoff spot or you need some help. And this is the time of the season that I look way ahead into the playoff stretch for key streaming options that might make the difference for my season. All right, let's start at quarterback. We'll start with Russell Wilson. He's 19% owned. He'll probably find himself in a shootout for the next couple of weeks given his schedule. His schedule looks like this. He's at Washington, then home at Baltimore, at Cleveland, at Cincy, and then home to Cleveland. Now, at first glance, these games don't look like that great of an opportunity, but Cleveland gave away one of their top pass rushers to Detroit this weekend, and Washington and Baltimore will score a lot of points. This could be an excellent bye week or even an injury option that could take you all the way through the playoffs. The second quarterback is Carr. He's 13% owned. He's got a decent bye week matchup against Atlanta, but it doesn't profile for much more than that. Start him if you're desperate this week, but there's not much going forward. Okay, and the last quarterback is Cooper Rush. Okay, hear me out on this one. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to get more starting reps in practice. And then by week 14 through 16, the fantasy playoffs, he gets Cincinnati, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. And if CeeDee Lamb is healthy and is still playing by then, he could give you 25 points each week. Maybe a bye week 14 starter and an injury handcuff for the playoffs. I'm just saying, Cooper Rush, he's out there. There's not much else. At running back, let's start off with Estime. 2% owned. This is more of a bench stash option with Denver likely not going to the playoffs. I mean, they could if they went out, but he may get more playing time because Denver needs to see what they've got in the rookie, especially with Javonte Williams leaving next year more than likely. The second running back is Akers. He's 10% owned. It looks like he's the backup to Jones right now. He's only getting 8 touches a game, but Jones has been injury prone, and if he gets hurt again, he'll be a low end RB1 starter moving forward. Moving on to wide receiver, let's start off with Akine. He's 4% owned. He's got a TD in 4 straight games. Not many wide receivers can say that right now, but his targets are low, and he's a touchdown dependent wide receiver. So far, so good. But will the streak run out? This week, he's up against the Chargers, and that's a tough matchup. But his week 11 through 16 is amazing and could bring some serious bye week scoring and bench potential if you roster him right now. Second wide receiver is Shepard. He's 9% owned. We kind of already talked about it, what's happening with the Bucks. If he's healthy and he goes, he's going to get 5 to 8 targets from Mayfield. So he's decent this week if he's healthy. And then last is Palmer. If Shepard can't go, he's only 2% owned. He's probably going to get the 5 to 8 targets that would have gone to Shepard. Moving on to tight end, the first one we'll talk about is Gesicki. He's 32% owned, and with Higgins doubtful, he stands to get plenty of targets against Baltimore tomorrow night. He could be a good bench stash moving forward, but it really depends on Higgins' status. He's got a bye week 12, and Higgins will probably be back by then. The second tight end is Theo Johnson. He's only 1% owned at Carolina. He's young. He's getting better, but he's nursing a couple of injuries right now. He has a good matchup against Carolina if you need a bye week player, but check on his health first. All right, last we'll talk defense. The first one we'll talk about is Miami. They're 27% owned. It's not a great play this week, but week 11 they get Vegas, and week 12 they get New England, and they're both at home. So potential for high sacks, low scoring. Other than that, they're droppable. The second defense is Cincinnati. Again, it's not a great play this week, but week 14 they get Dallas, who will probably be out of playoff contention, and just in case CeeDee Lamb sits, that's even better. And then week 15 they go into Tennessee. The last defense is Washington. They're 35% owned. They may or may not be out there. This week is not good, but week 12, they're at Dallas. Week 13, they get Tennessee. Week 14 is a bye, and week 15 is New Orleans. This could be good for the playoff stretch for you. Okay, again, this was more of a playoff potential preview for the waiver wire strategy. There's not much left out there for week 10, and there's a lot of tough matchups that make it even more interesting on the waiver wire. Still time to prep for the playoffs, though, so keep that in mind. All right, let's take a quick look at Thursday Night Football for a preview of how to handle your lineups. It's the Bengals versus the Ravens. Now, this is always a bitter matchup. It's going to get chippy. The Ravens got tougher at the corner position with a trade, and I expect Chase to get double covered and have difficulty just like he did last week. Higgins is doubtful, so that means Gesicki is going to draw a lot more targets, and he has a great chance to score. Yoshivaz is a decent start here, but he's going to be touchdown dependent. Chase Brown is going to be the workhorse back here. And Khalil Herbert, who is just newly acquired, he's only going to sprinkle in a couple of carries to spell him, but he isn't startable at this point. For the Ravens, Jackson, Henry, Flowers, they should get plenty of points. Andrews is a nice start. Also working without Likely, competing for targets is a good thing. Deontay Johnson is a risky start again. He wasn't targeted last week, just like I told you he wouldn't be. And then he's probably only going to get a couple targets this week. So he's definitely going to be a risk-reward type of play. Now, this game profiles as a shootout, and it has the highest over-under for the week in Vegas at 53. So start almost everyone with confidence. Okay, there's your waiver strategy and your Thursday Night Football preview. Remember, when in doubt, go with your gut. Before we sign off, I want to give a shout out to our men and women in uniform who protect the freedoms we hold dear. Thank you for your service and sacrifice. And finally, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us on X, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you can stay up to date on our latest content. And until then, remember, established dominance isn't just a catchphrase, it's a commitment. Are you ready?